one of the listen to where you commented when it had the 4 themes to not bother so much with them, because I will confess I don't have any yellow in my themes, and I was getting real upset about that. I was like, does that mean I'm an off-balance person, or what is that? You know, I'm seeing that as weaknesses and stuff, so I appreciate you pointing that out, that that's just another way of them separating them or dividing them, and I'm sure you'll probably maybe talk a little bit more about that, but that's the 2 inputs that I have. I'm really enjoying the workshops, too. I could spend all day on this, just absorbing it and figure out how to use it and apply it in all kinds of different ways. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being part of it. And it's true. I mean, it's like the 4 domains. That's one of the things that a skilled coach or facilitator of Clifton Strengths would be able to articulate and help talk people down from that panic of like, I don't have all 4 represented, and what does that mean? And, you know, so we spend some time talking about the 4 domains and how to work with clients, because they're going to want to know. They're going to know there's 4 domains. They're going to ask what the colors mean, and how we handle that is really important, so that people don't walk away from StrengthsFinder feeling inept or like they're missing something. That's definitely not the point. And it's one of the real dangers of the 4 domains. So that's why we're cautious about it. We think it's fine, but I think a skilled interventionist would be able to help people through that understanding.
Oh, yes. And you can always point to mine. I have all 5 in the same domain. So that might make everybody feel a little better.
Yeah. And just to kind of cut to the spoiler, we see the 4 domains not as a way to break down the 34 themes. We see the 4 domains as 4 descriptions of the kinds of demands life places on us. So life places various demands on us, and some of them require thinking through, some require influencing and getting other people mobilized, and some require building deeper relationship, and others require execution and getting things done. But any theme could be used toward any one of those 4 applications or for any one of those demands. And then this StrengthsFinder doesn't lose power, it increases someone's power. Anyway,
I remember you pointing that out. That was really good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get started. I mean, we're already, you know, kind of jumping into these things. So, Felinda, do you want to take it away?
Yes. So I just want to speak to what we were talking about earlier and just say thank you for the people that are weighing in, that they're enjoying the training, because that's something that, you know, like Adam said, that's why we're here. I've taken a lot of trainings in my life, and a few years back, I took this training that was so dull that I vowed I would never take another training that wasn't fun and didn't excite me. You know, I was just like, enough with the terrible trainings, you know, and the content was great, but it just was so painful to sit through. So we are trying to make a course that builds community, that builds, you know, positive effects in your life and your work. And so if you see anything we can improve to do that, please tell us, because that is absolutely our goal. And it means a lot to both of us. I think we should start right in with the 4 domains worksheet, since we're already on the topic. What were any experiences filling that out, questions, comments, insights that you found? Did everybody have a chance to fill it out? Maybe
I didn't. Where is it located, actually?
It should be in the download section of the course. So Adam, if you could bring that up.
I can.
In Kajabi, and while he's doing that, is that everybody's experience? Did anyone fill it out yet?
Well, maybe we didn't assign that one.
So we have.
but I didn't have a chance to fill it either because, like her, I couldn't find it again when I was going to go in and do it. So I'm looking to see, anxious to see where he shows it to us.
In course 4, there was just the PowerPoint slides and the mnemonic worksheet, which was just a one-page document. So, because I thought maybe it was like part of that.
Yeah, so this is where it might get a little confusing, and we are also still trying to work this out, where the best place to put the homework. So where we usually put that and the downloads for the next week is actually, it would have been in session 3. So it would have said homework to complete before session 4.
Oh.
I know that's not very clear, and we're still trying to fiddle with it because we want you to see it before you get to session 4, so you know it's something to have done. But you know what I mean? So we're still wrestling with that a little bit. Adam, are you having a hard time pulling it up?
No, I haven't. Oh, I just.
Okay, so I did this last week.
Okay, so
I thought it was for last week.
For session 3.
Yeah.
That's what we're kind of like. Oh, Adam, can you pull up session 3 in the T2S Masterclass? If not, I can.
Yeah. Session 3
that.
here. How do I preview it?
You could preview it just at the top if you want. You were on the correct screen, just under T2S Masterclass, the main heading. Yep, right there. So if you go down into session 3, so let me explain this because this is something we know is kind of weird, and I think there's an easy solution that we're just not seeing. But what we do is we put, we have session 3, which was last week, and then we're like complete before session 4, so that you have a chance to see it. And that's where like everything in the download session would be there for the next week. But I know that's confusing. So does that help clarify?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And would you rather see it a different way? Like, is that going to be confusing?
I figured it out last week, and I know my brain would rather have it. Usually I watch the video and then do the homework. So having it be on the week of the video would be helpful.
Be easier. That is more logical. Would you all, if I go in and change stuff around, will you, maybe I'll just try to figure out something like, for homework, make sure you look at, the week ahead or something.
But isn't it right here? Like under.
Yeah, it's under session 3 and we're in session 4, so it's not in the. It worked the first time we had the class, and so we've just done it that way. But we have a different group that's not trainers, they're an organization. It's the first time it's been an issue, and so we're kind of like, okay, that's new, how do we fix it? So
Felinda, just to kind of maybe explain what went on in my brain was, so when I bring up the session and I go to look at the video, I'm not scrolling down all the way. I'm just clicking play. And I wasn't reading the rest.
I see, and it doesn't show up because it's sort of below the text.
Yeah.
That's probably it.
All
right, I will work on a fix this week. There might be a change. I'll probably, it might take a week to figure it out, but just kind of keep in mind that I always put complete before session 4 or complete before session 5 if that's helpful. And then I'll try to figure out something because that's a good point. That's probably what's happening. Because I'm like, why this time? Well, yeah. So how many people have filled out the 4 domains worksheet? Because we can save that for next week if we need to. 2 people so far?
I haven't. Also got confused.
Okay.
Mine's partially completed.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, because it's okay if we talk about it a little bit, because I do think this one is an important concept. And maybe for those who have filled it out can also kind of shed some light on their experience with it, because you kind of have to wrestle with this a little bit. It's not obvious from the get-go usually. So for the people that have filled it out, what was your experience? Was it easy? Was it clear? Did you struggle with it? Did you struggle some more than others?
I'll share. Yeah, so mine's half filled out because it was not an easy thing to do. I found that in order for me to complete it, it was going to take a lot of time for me to really think through and have to understand the theme first and then figure out how to connect it into those domains. And so I wasn't quite successful, but I did give it a try. And I can tell you, I did better with a couple of the themes than others. I'll let someone else say.
Right? That's exactly how this is. And the reason you're going to hear this like almost straight away from your clients as usually the first couple of questions. What do the colors mean? Why don't if I don't have all the domains represented, and is something wrong? And we want you to be able to really have a very solid and in-depth response. And it really does start with seeing how it would show up for you. So one thing I'd like to suggest, if people that haven't filled it out or you're working on it, think of some examples or some times in your life. So like on, say, for Denise, for connectedness, it sometimes is even hard for people to connect connectedness to relationship building, even though it's in that domain. And I don't know if that was your experience, Denise, but that has been in the past, because it's kind of like, well, if I can see all the connections, isn't that big picture thinking? You know?
Yeah, so if it was in that domain, I just took a pass on that part and worked on the others.
I love it. But I would suggest try to think of a concrete example. So like connectedness could actually even be something as concrete as when you saw the connections, like if you met one friend and you knew that they would enjoy meeting another friend because that would enrich their life experience in some way that maybe they themselves wouldn't have thought of. That could be an example of relationship building. Thinking if you thought, you know, someone came to you for career advice and you were like, oh, well, you know, this kind of is, you know, your skill set actually relates to this other maybe area that you're not thinking of and you could apply it there. I mean, that would be both relationship building and thinking. So I want you to also see there's a lot of crossover too, so that these categories are not black and white at all. So, you know, because that could fall under influencing too, like maybe you're helping steer their career path or their development. Anyway, so I'm going to turn it back over to my original question. Anyone else struggle with this? Feel like this was helpful?
Linda, when I introduced the 4 domains, when I'm working with an individual or a team, before I even introduce the 4 domains, I ask those 4 questions. I say, how do you, relate? How do you influence others? How do you do the strategic thinking? And I get them to talk around that so that they already have that feeling around how do they do each one of them, so that they don't start panicking when they all top 5 are in one domain. And so I was already on the same page as you guys, because I've been working with it from the time that strengths-based leadership came out, and I really enjoyed the book. But I just found that it was too tunnel vision rather than the bigger picture. And so I do like to use it because I think that it just opens up, as Adam said right in the beginning, around the demands of life. And I love that. So that connection was really beautiful for me. It's just taken my way of thinking to a different level. So I really, really, I just think it is important to make sure that everybody doesn't start to panic and feel isolated or not good enough or any of that. Yeah.
I agree. And that's such a good point, Meryl, that asking them to explain the way it shows up for them is one of your best tools at any level of intervention. It's just going to it does so many things, right? Like it breaks the ice, it starts getting them into the content, the connecting phase. It just shows that unique experience, because especially if you're in a group and someone's explaining how it shows up and someone else either has the same and it shows up that way, or the same theme, but it shows up a different way, that generally sparks a really nice conversation. So absolutely, that's a great point. And I find it really personally reassuring, and also what usually kind of immediately helps with this is when people are very clear that this was not part of the original assessment, the domains. Mm-hmm. You know, to embrace it as a learning tool and some other really useful things is great, but just to make sure they understand that, you know, that was not Donald Clifton's idea. That usually is kind of like, oh, okay, now I can accept it for what it is, but understand that it might, you know, there are already, you know, different, sort of different parts of the Gallup materials. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I really liked using this for the themes I connect less with. I feel like it made me overall have a better sense of them. I will say none of my themes fall under thinking, and I've always kind of acknowledged that. And I think the thinking for all of them, my answer was like, well, to ask good questions as my way around it. But I think it's good that I know I have none that fall into thinking, but now I'm in this weird place of never trusting myself when I'm in that domain. So it's good that I'm using other people, but I kind of am figuring out how to navigate that now.
That's a great point too, Lauren. And I think what I would suggest there is a lot of the way you approach things starts with thinking. So you wouldn't even be entering into the relationships with the people or the initiatives or the, you know, the level of ability that you have if you didn't first actually start with the thought process. So I want to just suggest that you probably have a lot more capacity in that area. And that's the one I hear a lot too, of like, well, you know, well, exactly what you said pretty much. And that's why I think those domains are so tough, you know, because they just do this funny exclusion of things that, like, no, you're naturally good at it. It's just the way you do it. You know, you're going to think of it. How can I make this better? Before you act on it, before you gather other people to come along with you. I mean, that's all in there.
I want to say, sorry, go ahead.
I would say it also makes sense because in our program we've had to do a lot of evaluations, and everybody in the room is always on the same page and gets it. And I'm like, but what about this? But how about this? And I get now that a lot of it is just how my internal thinking does not match those that made a life of this, probably because they have some natural talent in it. So it makes a lot of my frustrations make sense. Now I'm just trying to figure out what to do with them. And sorry, I'm sick, so
I'm sorry you're sick.
I might mute and disappear, but I'm always listening.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here, even if you're sick. I just want to say, I mean, I look at your themes and I see thinking going on right now. What's the best way to get the best results? What's the most efficient use of our resources? What's best for the people I care about? What do they need? What's going on with them? What matters to them? What's the best way to express this idea or get it across? what's unique and what's worth paying attention to? What can we pull out that's worth our notice? What is a challenge? What would be the next step? What would it look like to go forward and kind of venture into territory that most people haven't gone before? Because I have self-assurance. I'm fine with that. I don't, so I mean, like I could go through those and say, this is your way of thinking. Or I could look at these and go, this is your way of executing, because you don't have any executing themes. Are you worried about that? I don't think so. I think you're marvelous at getting things done. And these, I could look at what's the best use of my time? Who needs what from me that I should get done to take care of the people I care about? What can I do to really help make sure message sent equals message received? We're all on the same page. What can I do that would take care of a special need or a particular focus? What can I do to expand my horizons and tackle new projects? I mean, so you could just, when you get conversant with the 34 themes, it just, the colors disappear, really.
And so Adam, can you pull up I don't know if you have it handy. If not, that's okay. We have a little guide, the theme upgrades, and this is kind of, if you're going to be working with somebody, this is exactly what we're doing here, asking you to do, is sort of like little hints of, if you're working with someone that doesn't have a theme you're familiar with, or even if you are very familiar with it, you can use this as a jumping off place to kind of spur ideas to help people get beyond this, or even if you see maybe they're in a rut and they're not using it in a way that you think they can, that would be a place to go. So it's also in the handouts in the resources, but it's here. It's got its own little section. And I see, Teresa, your question is something missing. It was in the download section. I think that was you. That went fast. So the theme upgrade. So you'll see we have each icon with the 5 bullet points, always a quick little learning tool. And then we talk about how you might use this theme in another domain. So that's just another resource you could look to. This one we do feel like is as a draft level. We're working on it, but I'm going to reintroduce this point right now, that everything we have is not meant to be, rigid. It's meant to be a conversation starter or an entry point. So if you have somebody that's like looking at that and is like, well, that's not me, well, then they just talk about how it is, or they're like, yes, but, or yes, and. It's not meant to be the end all be all. It's meant to actually get somebody into it and get them to that next step. So that's a resource. We will come back to that a little bit next week. I'll make a little note since it was a little confusing. And another point I'll say there too, try to have the homework done, but if you don't worry about it. Just keep going through. Like, don't worry that you don't have it done for tonight if you don't have it done. You'll get it done. And so, and we can talk about this a little more fluidly too. Any other questions on that area before we move on to our next topic?
I do want to say a couple things real quick. Really just the point of this worksheet is really to help people delve more into the themes, see how, this document here, it's a 2-pager. There's the exercise and here's the instructions. And here we actually, explain where the 4 domains model came from, and that some things need to be clear, and we spell them out in here. So feel free to, talk through this with your clients, and then we give them the next step, which is to complete this. And here's just an example of a completed form that someone filled out. Okay.
Any other questions on the domains before we go on? Nope. Okay. All right, so let's talk just a moment about the theme anatomy. Is everybody really comfortable with their own top 5? Any initial questions? I have some things I want to say on it, but any initial questions before I jump in?
I have an initial question, actually. And it's StrengthsFinder 2.0 versus strengths-based leadership. I know a lot of people who have different themes come out in that. So what's your take on that? Just, keep it kind of original and just stick with the first StrengthsFinder, and I don't know how to take that.
So this one's yours. You love this topic.
Yeah. So there really is the assessment is the same between StrengthsFinder 2.0 and strengths-based leadership. Before I go on, let me make sure that's what we're talking about, right? Those two compared to each other?
Yeah, so you mean they're the exact same questions?
Yeah, same assessment.
Huh.
The difference is on strengths-based leadership, if you use the access code from the book for strengths-based leadership, it'll produce a little bit of a different report. You'll get your, it's more of a leadership report, and it involves more of these 4 domains. But it's the same assessment. So if you're top 5 in strengths-based leadership, if they took that assessment, that would the results are the same as if they, yeah. So
okay.
That's all.
Do you know, Adam, do they give the signature report along with that, or is it just the leadership? I don't remember if they do. So now Gallup's done a few changes, and now when you take the StrengthsFinder 2.0 from that, now it's not even really, it is a book, and you can still take the code from the book, but you can just go right to the website. You get an ebook, a copy of the ebook after you get the report, and you get these signature themes, and you get a couple other reports. And I don't know if the strengths-based leadership does something similar, but what I would suggest is we do have it on our document generator. So it would just essentially be more information of the same, more support information. And yeah, kind of just not geared toward leadership, sort of geared toward general. I'm not sure why they did it that way exactly, except like you said, maybe to have some kind of refresh or interesting different take. And I think that, I enjoy that book too, and I think it's really helpful, but I think that probably does lead to some confusion. But if you've taken the leadership one and you don't think they get the signature themes report, you can print them out one on your document generator account.
Okay.
That was a very good question. And as far as we know, the Strengths Quest, which is the education-based one, is also the same. And the data from that is rolled into the StrengthsFinder data. So when you hear 18 million people, that also includes the educational arm, and I'm assuming every version, maybe it's the strength-based leadership. They don't separate it out. Because I was curious at one point, like, do they separate it out, and can we see children versus adults, and is there some kind of, no, it's all in there, all mixed up.
So I want to say on the Strengths Quest, which is their student version, as Felinda said, that's a separate website altogether. So it's a different login, different buying codes. You're probably not going to use it unless you're going to work with students. And then you do kind of create your own account on Strengths Quest. And then their reports would be articulated from a student's perspective. So they would give tips on how to study, how to be a better student using these themes. Whereas in strengths-based leadership, the report would give you how to be a better leader using these themes. And there's also strengths-based selling. I've never seen that report, but I would imagine that it would be how to sell better, how to be a better salesperson with your themes.
I personally, if it were up to me and someone asked me, I would just tell them to take StrengthsFinder 2.0 to kind of cut some confusion, unless you feel like one would be appropriate. That's what we base our materials on, as you've probably already figured out. So, any other initial, and does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Any other questions initially? Great. So theme anatomy. Is everyone comfortable with their top 5? We talked about that already a little bit. If not, say so, and we can talk a little bit more, because this is this is an important tool. Between this and the COIN model, which we started to get into, those are probably the two most common tools from Talent to Strength materials that you're going to use with your clients, particularly if you're doing a lot of one-on-one coaching or development. So we want you to be pretty comfortable and conversant with all 34, not just your top 5. So get familiar with your top 5 and then start playing around with all 34, because you will have, so much information here when you're working with somebody, because essentially so much stems from any one of these areas. And, what Adam and I were talking about a little bit today even is the behaviors that we see. That's the external expression of a lot of these internal, some of these are more internal, the thoughts and the feelings, the situations that are matches or mismatches, needs that are being fulfilled or not fulfilled, purpose. You can look to this, try to gear it toward the positive, of course, but this is a place you can come back to over and over to talk through, to sort of identify for clients, to help shift toward more and more alignment. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And then do start getting familiar with all 34. It's a really nice condensed learning tool.
And as Felinda said earlier about something else, these are our interpretations. This is not Gallup official. So we're gonna submit this for approval to Gallup as we do with our other materials, but we just haven't done that yet because we're still working on it. We identified a typo in input, invaluably is spelled wrong, so, we're always improving it. And also, we get feedback on what communicated well to clients and if there's a better way to say it. So always feel free to funnel that information when you use this tool to us. I wanted to ask you guys, did you read through the instruction page on it? And if so, did you find it helpful?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, I did. This is Teresa. And I have to really say, boy, I love it, the fact you have that mismatch at the bottom.
Great.
Because that sounds so more positive than talking about weaknesses and stuff like that. It's like, so already you're kind of empowering people by saying, oh, this is going on because it's a mismatch, it's a misalignment. And having them phrasing it that way, I think it's just awesome. So I commend you all for this. This is wonderful.
Great. Thank you for that, because it's true. It's like, it always struck me as wrong. Like when people take an assessment, even something that's meant to be positive, like StrengthsFinder, they're automatically going to start looking for, well, what's my weaknesses? Which, how ensconced we are in this weakness fixing mentality. But I personally enjoyed thinking of it in terms of match or mismatch, because then I can do something with it. If my theme is a weakness, then it's bad, and I'm embarrassed, and I gotta figure out how to correct these lifelong habits. But instead, if I just say, no, every theme is viable and valuable, it's just a matter of, are you applying the right theme at the right level at the right time? And that's where COIN comes in, because COIN's meant to help people think about that. After they connect with their themes, they observe how they use their themes. Then they can learn to interrupt, which is like a full stop on a theme. It's like you just are pulling the plug out of the wall, But then once you learn to do that, that's just a stepping stone. Interrupt is a stepping stone to being able to develop that nuance, that right dial, that's what I'm doing with my hand, is I'm dialing it up or dialing it down, and to the situationally appropriate level. And I just put those words together, and people just seem to like that. And it does, it just works. It's situationally appropriate level of your theme. And that's the nuance phase.
Yeah, and that's something that we are really adamant about, providing empowerment and choice. Because otherwise it's like, oh, it's just my weakness, can't do anything about it. And then you actually even see people start to use it like almost as an excuse for bad behavior, which is not okay. And instead, really, it comes down to if it's just a mismatch or a match for a situation, and then you can choose how you're going to modify your behavior to either fit the environment more or get out of that environment. And I don't know, I love that kind of thought process so much more.
And I also want to say a note here too about the reports that you give to people. So I would say if you're just working with somebody or trying to introduce them to their themes, you're going to want to give them the top 5 diagram, the signature themes report, which is Gallup's standard definitions. And these are all on the document generator. And then the third is the theme anatomy report, which would be 2 pages. And then I also wanted to just show you, just as a resource so you know it's available, we have these folders here. And what these are, these just have some of our main talent to strength models on it. You see it has COIN up top, has theme anatomy here. It has our strength ladder or performance ladder here. And I think it has one more, yeah, the alignment meter in here. And then it just makes for a nice little thing to give. It just says talent to strength on it. And if you wanted to if you have your own kind of company branding, you could just put a sticker right in here or whatever with, so you can customize it for your own. We don't expect you to just advertise for talent to strength. We don't really care about that. Maybe a little bit because we put our website on there.
But you could put it over on the logo, but you could also put your business card in on the.
Yeah. So we can give you the design to order these for yourself. Or I have, I think, 2,000 of them in my living room where, you can, it's probably cheaper if you just bought them through me, because printing 2,000 of them gave us a pretty good quantity discount. Whereas if you were to order like 100 or 500 of them, it still cost you, $5 or $6 a piece. I think we're doing these for like $3 a piece or something. So, if you want to
bulk discount, if you want, if you're going to do
workshop. We're not really trying to make money off these. I just wanted them for myself, but I didn't want to pay $5 a piece to print them. So I ordered a bunch.
So Adam, when you come to South Africa, can you please put them in your suitcase for me?
Yes, I will. I will carry them on, and they will be my emotional support animal.
Thank you.
So I think we'll move on to COIN, but we can always come back because theme anatomy is such a key piece. And I'll just explain just an overview. I mean, we've started to get into the nuts and bolts of the model, but the way that I use it, I essentially use it almost the same way for a workshop of large group or one-on-one coaching. I prefer one-on-one coaching because it's spread out over time with more application. But essentially taking a group through the process, starting at, raw talent, connecting, observing, interrupting nuance to mature talent. Honestly, that's usually too much for one workshop, but just giving the overview and worksheets to whatever configuration you want to give. That's sort of, the workshop in a box kind of thing from us. But I use this as a coaching almost package or an entry into coaching, where they take the strengths finder, they get the reports, and we work through the COIN model. I usually try to cover one section, or it doesn't always happen quite so neatly, but I do take them through the connect phase with the worksheets, and they bring their homework back, and then they get more, and we do the observe and the homework. So you can have a coaching model that you can follow. I've found it works really well, and it usually leads to, once that foundation is established, you get into some other more general coaching with the person, but it's been a good anchor. It's worked well for my clients. So just something to think about. We will talk more about that as we get into the one-on-one coaching. But do you have any initial questions over COIN or thoughts, things you like?
Wait a second. I have to say, when I first saw this too, is like, good, that makes so much sense. Just the fact, and I can see how you could spend months on this with someone and so I was glad, I think, when on one of our previous sessions, I'd asked you, Adam, about this, and you were saying, oh, it does take a while. You know, you do have to connect first, and that takes a while to do this and observe. And I was thinking, I'm so glad you said that, too, because it was my, gosh, this is mind-boggling, you know, just the first one. So it makes so much sense how, and just even doing a presentation, say if you were to start off doing a group presentation to chamber or something, just getting them with that connecting first and not even, you know, talk about the others, just kind of introduce them, but don't talk about them, because that connecting is just, you could spend so much time just on that and getting the buy-in that way. But this is a really, it just makes so much sense. You're kind of like, I almost felt like, darn, why didn't I think of that kind of thing? So this is cool. This is really cool.
Good. Yeah, Gallup talks about in their certification, their version of this would be name it, claim it, aim it. So you should name your themes by taking the StrengthsFinder, claim your themes, which I think claiming might encompass like quite a few of these, and then aiming it, which is like their way of like do something with your themes. And I personally found it to be a little simple, and it didn't really describe my experience. And so COIN was what described my experience. You know, like I had to connect with my themes, and I didn't connect with my themes for 2 years. I took StrengthsFinder and I didn't even look at it again. And then I pulled it out, and then I really connected with my top 5 and try to learn all 34. And then I would try to observe my themes, and observing my themes is when I really, it increased my connection to my themes. It's like, I see how input works, or I see how my individualization works. And I still do. I see it all the time. Felinda helped me with an insight the other day that I get disappointed if people don't individualize me. You know, if they don't see my uniqueness, then I feel it's not as satisfying for me. So it's because I want to see other people's uniqueness. I just assume everybody would be that way, and they're not. So it's just like an interesting way to observe how individualization works, and then learning to interrupt it. Why get hurt feelings because someone didn't individualize me? They're not an individualizer. Why would they individualize me? You know, so anyway, it described my own progression, and I'm still like, I always have trouble interrupting my themes. I'm better at it now. Believe me, there was no way I could interrupt my themes before. I was the kid who got kicked out of class, you know, and because I couldn't control, you know, my ideation, for example. And just yesterday, I controlled it in the middle of a lecture. I teach a college class, and my co-instructor pretty much said, "Adam, I'm going to kill you," is what she said in front of everybody. But it was true. And it immediately triggered me to interrupt my ideation. The issue was we were running out of time, and I wanted to tell, you know, stories off the beaten path, and definitely needed to interrupt it. So, you know, it was helpful. And then I also want to say one more thing. There's another model that I think is a nice way to, before you even introduce the COIN model, and it's this model, and we may have talked about it, and I don't know, but it's this kind of 5 chariots diagram where we show what it's like before we've ever learned about our themes. We've always had like these 5 horses that are disheveled and doing their own thing, and we're kind of holding on for the ride. And then afterwards, after we learn to mature our themes, it looks more like this, where we're in control and we deploy our themes, and everybody's happy.
I use this one in the introduction a lot, just to sort of orient the whole concept. So that one usually comes in raw talent, which is kind of my version of the introduction. So yeah, because in the before, we're still going for a ride. It's just kind of a wild ride sometimes.
And what do you call this again? This diagram? What do you?
The chariot of
name
life. No, I'm just kidding. Just like the chariot model is how I refer to it.
The chariot. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, any of these visuals too, We have them in the PowerPoint, but I find that it's kind of fun and really engaging for clients, even just in a one-on-one coaching session. If I'm on Zoom, I'll pull this up, and here's the model, here's the visual. So just something to keep in mind if possible. Or I'll also have my laptop and have the PowerPoint and just jump to that model when I'm describing it with a client if it's in person. And just a note about COIN. Like Adam just said, he's still experiencing insight and depth and ways to interrupt and nuance, and that is life, right? So we have it in this very linear order for teaching purposes to your clients. However, it really should look more like an infinite loop because it's always kind of something you're going to just be experiencing. And, we're using the language of the StrengthsFinder, but really that experience in life, it's like each new situation, each new encounter, it's like, oh, well, here's a new way to nuance my, intellection. Okay. So just keep that in mind too. If somebody's like, you'll start to know, like when you have a very early beginner, obviously they're starting at raw talent and connect, and they can stay there as long as they need to, but you'll see them progress. You'll see that knowledge base deepen. But then once you do see that, it's, I think, a good thing to explain, like, because they'll say like, well, when do I, when is sort of like this, when will I know how these things and get to this mature talent? Well, some areas, some activities are already there, and it's just going to be in this, this more organic, infinite loop experience. But, we are working on a model that will hopefully visually represent that, but we don't have it quite yet.
Another note too on that, under raw talent, what I'm trying to do is just explain what talent is even. And one of my favorite ways to describe the themes is that they are our spontaneous, unplanned, unrehearsed reactions to stimuli in our environment. So when you meet a new person, I might individualize that person, or I have a new assignment and I'm figuring out what's the strategy, my strategic theme. So we have all 34 themes, but my top 5 are my top 5 kind of filters through which I take in stimuli. And just that recognition alone, I think, is really important, that we now have a name for those different filters, and we now can understand them more. What we can't do is just get rid of them or change them immediately. So we may as well learn how to contend with them.
Any questions here on this model, the application, the working with clients, anything related to COIN? I know this one, well,
I do have a question, actually. Can you expand a little bit on the difference between interrupt and intervene?
So I think from my perspective, and Adam might have some more to add, I think when you're interrupting, it's a personal experience. So let's say it's more like intervening might be a coach or a friend or somebody external offering support, where interrupt has to come from the individual. You might get kind of a nod, like Adam's, co-presenter might be like, heads up, you've got to interrupt this right now. This situation is a mismatch for your ideation, where maybe Adam didn't really think that. I would say she was intervening. Adam himself had to interrupt. And I think that's really important because it's up to the individual to really start to learn to identify those matches versus mismatches. Does that answer your question, though?
That is helpful. Thank you.
I'd want to add that I think interrupt, means to just stop. I think intervene could means stop, or intervene could be more, like I could say, oh, I need more of your responsibility theme here, or I need less of it. So intervene, or I could redirect it. I could say, don't use your responsibility theme here, use it over here, and maybe use another theme over here more. So I think intervene gives you more options, whereas here, interrupt is just stop, and that's why it's a pause button. We try to make our visuals more than just shapes, so it's the pause, universal pause symbol here.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. Great question.
I'd also like to point out on the little bullet points below each one, that's where you start to see our talent to strength kind of, we want to give you as much as absolutely possible. We want you to, if you're going to work with a client, be able to work with them for 10 years if you have enough content for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We understand that that's not always, realistic, or the way that you're going to be presenting with a client. So we tried to separate those out into where they're a little bit more almost standalone, so you can pick and choose what you need. So don't feel like when you go to present that you have to cover all of those things. Of course, that'd be great. We'd love it. I think your clients would enjoy it too. But it's a lot. It's the depth part of it, and you may not have time for depth. And if you do, great, but you can pick and choose. So you'll see as we get into the PowerPoint a little later that each one of those has its own little section. And one day we actually hope to have a video where it's just the online foundations course, and you can take that and they're all broken out nice and neat. I can't wait for that day. But just so you know, when you're learning how to present this and work with clients, don't worry, you do not have to cover all of that. If you can, great. If not, okay, pick the ones you like. Let's see, I think are there any other questions? I don't want to rush that, but I also, if you don't have any questions, I don't want to belabor the point. As we go, definitely any of this, you're like, back in session 1, there was this model, because I guarantee someone else is going to have the question too. But we're going to start getting into the relationship building themes as a way of kind of really digging into the themes. We will be spending some time with that next week. Before we do that though, the mnemonic worksheet is your homework for next week. Some of you may have already done it, and you're ahead, and so you don't have to worry. But I wanted to share an example. Adam, if you could bring up either on the blog the Patricia's mnemonic.
Yep. So
the mnemonic can be as simple. If you don't memorize your themes in order, or your clients don't, it's just not going to be useful. Everyone here tonight knows that, but can't tell you, it's just one of those simple points that clients tend to overlook. I usually get them started with trying to get it on your phone somehow with a picture or whatever of the top 5 diagram. But unless you have it up here, it's going to go away sometime somewhere, and it's just not going to be as useful. So we start in the connect phase with this worksheet. A mnemonic can be as simple as words. It could be images. It could be a doodle. You can get creative with it. For example, one of our clients, she made a really creative example. So I want you to see it because it'll show you what's possible. And you can do this sketching, you can pull images, but what she did is she used words that represented her top 5. And as she was doing that, she started pulling images from the computer that sort of represented that concept to her. And then she realized that through the process of making her mnemonic and pulling these images, it actually represented the order that she sequences the way she approaches most things. So you can see here, and Adam, if you might be able to click on it, there's a full picture. Somehow that's cut off on the head.
I was trying to tell you that. So I'm trying to find her full one. It was Karen. It was Heather.
Well, if you click on the read more on the blog, it is inside the blog. Continue reading, yeah. I think down a bit shows.
Yeah.
That's where she had just started the beginning of her process, the analytical ask questions. And that was what analytical looks like to her. And then intellection, inward reflection, the thinker, et cetera, et cetera. So that's her pulling the images, and then she put it into one big image where it showed that progress of what happens. So something to think about if you want to add images to your mnemonic. Questions about the mnemonic. It's an important piece. It's a simple one.
I like this. I don't know, you may not be able to read it, but for the cartoon here, I think this was probably for her achiever, says, for your punishment, write 100 times, I will not waste my time on meaningless tasks, which is a meaningless task as the punishment. Anyway. Well, no, that's the discipline theme that she connected it to. Anyway, it was very creative. We liked it.
We thought you would like to see that. So, and that's the thing too, if you find that you want to add to or get creative with any of these assignments, please do. There's no, I have a lot of people like, am I doing this right? The answer is probably going to be yes, unless you just didn't do it. But you can get a lot more creative, and I'm going to be happy. So that'll be your homework for next week. It is kind of right now in the same place.
I just want to say, I don't want anybody to feel pressure. Just whatever would work for you to remember your top 5 themes, and you may have already done that, but whatever works for you, that's what you should do. If you want to be creative, be creative. If you want to be literal, be literal. It doesn't matter, because the whole purpose of that activity is merely just to be able to memorize your top 5 themes.
Well, in fact, I will confess that I was just like, I can't with this mnemonic. I can memorize 5 words in a row. That's what I'm going to do. So I had a hard time with this one. And Adam, yeah, my mnemonic was silly. So, it can be just as simple as memorizing them.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I did Myers-Briggs, I remember one of the things that the facilitator said was that so many people have difficulty remembering, what they are. And I thought, well, I don't want that to be me. So I came up with a mnemonic back then. And I've been using that approach for things for a while. And so I've already had a mnemonic for this. It's up on my whiteboard. So I'm like way ahead on the homework. Yay!
You could just be like, there it is. There's my homework. That's awesome.
Maybe I'll work on one for like the themes 6 through 10 or something like that. I'll have to have like this whole phrase.
Oh, that'll be cool. You'll have like a paragraph that'll just be in there. I love it.
Or what you could do is you could memorize all 34 themes in alphabetical order. And if you did, Felinda knows where I'm going with this. Felinda, where am I going with this?
I know where you're going with this. So I don't know if you all know, but Adam made a handy little learning tool, a song.
I don't know how it will play on.
This is JI in partnership with Talent to Strength, and I have a little something for all you Clifton Strengths finders.
Is it like a rap?
Yes, it is.
I'll let it play for just a few seconds.
That's also, you want me to be quiet so everyone can hear.
Achiever, activator, adaptability, analytical, arranger, belief, command, communication, competition, connectedness, consistency.
All right, so that's on the blog. If everyone is curious, it's also in the T2S resources as well. So another handy little learning tool, something fun.
Flynn is not the biggest fan of this video, and I, as you could tell, have a little too much pride in it. It's basically, you have a choice. You could pick the smart person or the good person. But in this case, the choice is easy because both of them are me. I'm kidding. All right, go ahead, Belinda. Take it away.
But again, a learning tool, and you'll see that one will come up maybe in a time or two again.
If you need it, it's there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So why don't we move into just touching on the relationship building themes? We're going to spend a lot more time next week, and we are at the hour mark. So I know that we're not going to go into a huge depth, but I do want to maybe cover, we have quite a few relationship building themes in this group, actually. So any initial questions? If you don't have it, anyone can ask anything. Is there one, we'll just start with maybe one tonight, that you're not clear on? Are you not clear on the differences between them? Anything you want to talk about. And we have a format we're going to talk through next week, but this is just to kind of get us started.
I just really appreciated, there were several that I know people and it made a lot of sense in the relationship themes video. And I really liked the chart. Sorry, I have a dog barking in the background. I really like the mature and unmature theme chart in the book too.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, that's what the videos are for. When we do those theme videos, we're trying to talk through a little bit more because, of course, you always want to go back to Gallup's standard definition. That is the official description of the themes. But then I think sometimes people need more in order to help them connect to it. Like I can't grab onto that part of it, but maybe this part of it. And you'll find that with different themes that sometimes they just can't connect. And as you gain more experience, you'll be able to help throw them another rope to grab onto to help them connect with the theme.
I'll just say, once you get more and more comfortable, many of you here are already comfortable with the individual themes, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of working with people. So don't worry. If you're new to this or newer to this, don't worry. It's supposed to feel overwhelming. And my best advice is, have your resources handy. You do not have to have everything memorized. You do not have to know everything. But if you're, just jump in there, start working with people, let them know that, hey, I just got access to a bunch of new material. Let's see what we can find about, you've got empathy. All right. Does this relate? That's why I kind of was stressing about, start with the theme anatomy. There's a lot of good information. It's really concise, but you have so much at your fingertips. You've got the Gallup stuff, you've got our stuff, but the actual just getting in and working with people will start to help make these clearer. And once you get a handle on these 34, it's like taking off in a rocket ship. Like it's just so much easier. So give yourself time, give yourself the chance to immerse. And don't worry if you're like, I don't remember the difference between harmony and empathy yet. Okay, look it up, take some time with it. Best thing is what I found is just talking to people with those themes, getting them to tell you stories.
Yep. I was just going to say, who's taught me most about the themes are my clients. Because early on I would say, oh, I'm not familiar with self-assurance or discipline or, so this will be fun to explore it with you. And that's it. I just get curious. And then I'd ask them questions like, how does this show, that's using my individualization thing, but anybody could ask the question, how does that show up for you? Or what is empathy like when it's full blast and, all of that. So Or if somebody says, I don't know much about discipline, Adam, I wish I could help you understand it more, but I'm still learning about myself. I say, well, let's discover it together. Let's read the standard definition together and things, go through the theme anatomy together.
That's why I do encourage the more people that you know really well that are close to you in your life, if you can get them to take this, it will accelerate your learning process so much because you'll have this long history with this person, and you'll be able to look back and see all the ways that it showed up, and you'll be able, you'll be close with that person, so you'll talk with them about it. It'll bring out actually more clarity in that relationship, which is fun. But I do think that's a really, really, really useful way to get familiar, because that just will give you like, oh, there's 10 years that I've been friends with this person. That's 10 years of examples of someone who has discipline. Now I can see all the ways that showed up for her, the ins and the outs, the matches and the mismatches. It's just, it's pretty illuminating, really. So any questions on that approach?
Any thoughts or questions about any of the themes? Is there any that you want to delve into that you're like curious about or unfamiliar with, or wanted to ask a question about, or if you have an insight about any of them?
I think connectedness was one I had trouble understanding, and is one that a coworker has, and I feel like I understand it better now, but any additional insight into it?
Yeah, real quick. Connectedness is actually a Siamese twin, a conjoined twin with belief. They used to be one theme called spirituality. But then, like, when you look at them, how they present themselves, they're very different. Belief is way more concrete, way more black and white, right and wrong. And connectedness is much more of that shades of gray and an intuitive aspect of spirituality. I love the icon for it, because I really love the way it just captures the sentiment of connectedness. It, for me, was also one, probably the most difficult one for me to wrap my mind around. And then when I started like realizing the people that I like, I tend to really just feel calm around and feel welcome around and just enjoy being around, accepted really, are people with connectedness. And it's just a spiritual, intuitive sense of the world and how all things are interrelated. And the way I think of it is like, in my mind, I picture when you drop a pebble in a pond and it makes the rings. And most people in their day-to-day life are just focused on the first ring or maybe the second ring. People with connectedness just have a sense of like 8 or 9 rings out, the ripple effects. And they're sensitive to that. Or you can almost take that shape and think of a spider web, that just kind of like branches out. And if I pluck on this little part of the spider web, the spider will feel it and know, oh, my fly is over there, or, pluck it over here. Oh, it's over there. They just sense all the things. And the last metaphor I'll use is, and kind of what inspired this image, is that there was a tree in my neighborhood and the jerks cut it down, but it was this massive tree and old. And I just figured that tree's root system just spreads all throughout my neighborhood. And it probably knows what's going on over 2 blocks over that way or 3 blocks south that way. And it all comes together into the central hub of this stoic, wise tree.
I love that. So the phrase that I always think of with connectedness too is universal big picture. It's just there for them. And like Adam said, it's just that really calming sense that they do see that interconnected web. I like that you memorialized the tree. I didn't know that you did that here. So, but I think that, you know, those metaphors, actually each one they have metaphors, but connectedness particularly lends itself to metaphor. And they tend to enjoy a good metaphor themselves usually.
Oh, that's probably why I like them so much, is I can speak very abstractly and they're like, I don't know what you mean, but I get it. I get you. And the other thing I want to say is there's an ethic that people with connectedness have. They don't want to just run roughshod over things because they just know there's going to be ripple effects. And so there's a gentleness about them and how they're very placid and careful in how they step, because they know that there's just unintended consequences down the line if you are too forceful or too blunt or too, you know, directive.
Anybody that's worked with somebody with connectedness has any insight to share? Oh, we have Teresa. I don't know if she's still on. She has it. So does Denise. I don't know why it's taking me forever to see everybody's names. Usually I'm pretty quick. Yeah, how does it show up for you two?
I drive people crazy with it, because I say, you know, I can see at work, like, we have this, and how come it's not with that, and why aren't we bringing all of this together? And you know, my boss just kind of looks at me and goes, well, you know, we can't fix everything. And you know, but that's just how I see it. And I don't express this stuff with the expectation that it's all going to happen. I can't help it. It just comes out.
And what happens when your boss or whatever says, well, we can't fix everything? Like, it's a dismiss.
Yeah.
It's a very important thing about themes, that if we don't really help people express their themes, now maybe he needs to channel you differently. Maybe he needs to say, Denise, I think you're focused on this too much. Like, I hear you that it's important, but it's just not in the cards right now, and you're going to have to let this go. Or that would be different than to say, you know, all right, well, just can't fix it. Blah, 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 I can't hear you. Anyway, you were going to say?
Yeah, I think they'll tell me, you know, the two of them that I share this stuff with, my boss and her boss, you know, they don't dismiss it outright. The problem, I think, sometimes in having this is, how do you control it, you know? And then you take connectedness, and then you add that in with responsibility, and, you know, like, I feel like I should be doing something about it. And I think I'm in a position now where I can actually try to make this happen. The challenge is prioritizing everything and not getting completely overwhelmed with it, which, you know, that responsibility is like a monster sometimes.
Well, I think, you know, your responsibility, it's interesting because someone without responsibility that has connectedness isn't going to feel that same kind of pressure. So you could maybe think of that and actually draw connectedness back in to help support responsibility. That, you know, that pressure, that guilt that responsibility is putting out there, connectedness is like, it's going to be okay. You know, like that's kind of one of the, it might not feel like it's going to be okay, but connectedness does understand that it is a bigger picture. It is a more complex experience. It takes time. And you might be able to call on that to kind of come in and soothe the responsibility a little bit, or say, look how we are working on the big picture. These are the ways. And I think one of the things that I would say about certain themes, connectedness is definitely one of them, deliberative too. Exactly what you said. You're not expecting people to fix the things that you've put out there. You just want them to see it, you know, and acknowledgement is important. So like, deliberative is going to be always talking about risk. They don't necessarily need you to change your behavior. They just need to know you heard that that's a potential risk. Connectedness. They just need to hear that that you've understood that's a potential connection, and maybe down the road something could really be shifted, maybe right in that moment, but that there are some themes that, and I don't know if maybe your boss has some of them, when they hear an idea, same with ideation. All my ideas, I do not expect someone to take on even a fraction of them. Input, same thing. I want them to take what works for them, throw all the rest away. Someone with context or achiever or responsibility, they might hear those ideas or those connections, and they might feel pressure, I've got to do all of them. Where someone with ideation or connectedness is like, oh no, I'm just throwing them out there. I just want you to hear them, to know they're there, that kind of thing. So that's something to think about, that the different themes operate in those behaviors differently. And so you might start distinguishing how on that nuance piece, when, so for me, like when the boss might not be the person that can always hear the big picture, that might be somebody who's thinking, if I hear the big picture, I have to do something about it, and I can't, freak out. I'm guessing, but it sounds like maybe. So I don't know if that speaks to you. I just know for me, like with ideation, which is a similar thing of like, I've got, it's in there, it's going to come out. I do try to edit internally now, which I never did before, to the specific audience. But whenever I'm with someone who gets it, so whenever you're with someone that they don't have to have connectedness, they just have to get it.
Yeah.
And let it go, explore it, have fun with it. But when you're around people that might feel that pressure, maybe internally even, you can kind of like, I think connectedness needs to celebrate the big picture and really fully acknowledge that it exists, but it might be more of an internal celebration around certain people. See how that feels and if that feels accurate. But I think you with it will have a lot more insight. That's just some of the stuff I've picked up with working with a few.
Yeah, I have a couple things too. I don't know how quick it'll be, but what you're describing here is the coin model experience. Like, okay, I have connectedness, and now you're observing these things about it. And then when you observe it, you could inquire to your connectedness, and you could ask it a question. One of the questions Felinda and I like is, does it matter? And you could apply this to any theme. Responsibility. Does it matter if I follow through on this? Ideation. Does it matter if this idea is expressed or come to life? You could just pick any theme. And empathy. Does it matter that this person's having those emotions? You don't have to obey your theme blindly. That kind of goes back to the chariot model, right? You're supposed to be in charge of your themes, not the other way around. The other thing I want to say too, we'll wait for later because I want to see what else we have to get done today, and Felinda has a better handle on that than I do.
Well, actually, I think we're coming to the point we could wrap up. I could talk about this all day because I think this is the part that's really fun. The actual, how do these things show up, and connectedness is a particularly, I think, lovely one because of that big picture, cosmic connections. And some people, I know one person had connectedness and was like, I don't want to, they almost labeled it like that was a bad thing. I think it is one of the most beautiful qualities out there. So like for me, and you're going to hear me say, I love everything about all the themes because I think the way they show up for people can be so lovely. And, I think that it's just one thing that would be good to ask. So connectedness, often I do think a lot like deliberative and ideation might get that feeling of being shut down because other people might not know how to quite interpret it if they don't have something like that. And so putting it out there that like, I don't need all of this fixed. I like expressing it. I like being able to make those connections and expressing them. And if they go somewhere, great. If not, that's okay. So that might be kind of a fun one to play with too, and with your coworker too, Lauren, to see if that seems like it fits or resonates. So I could stick around, but I know I want to respect people's time. Any questions before next week? If you don't have them here, but you have them later, reach out to us. We're here. But we'll stick around, and if you want to go, you can.
Denise, I just wanted to say to you, I think it was last week or the week before, where you mentioned that a co-worker or colleague had felt that you were unapproachable, and you were so surprised by that. And so was I, because I thought, well, they've never got to know you, because having connectedness, I could feel that immediately. And my relator also loves connectedness, and I know that I'm always going to feel safe when I'm around somebody that has connectedness. So my first words around that is that it is always kind, caring, and considerate. They just need to get to know you. That's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we will pick it up next week. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Adam, have you told us, maybe I missed it at some point, how you and Felinda came to be working together on this?
Yeah, I was walking around homeless, and she came along and said, you could be somebody. And she said, young man, there's no need to be down. Young man, pick yourself off the ground. Yes, no, we go all the way back. I was a hall director in graduate school, and she was a resident in the hall where I was the hall director. So we go back to circa 1995.
Goodness gracious me.
Yep. So we've been friends for a long time, and then somewhere along the way, so, when Adam was starting his practice, I helped him a little bit with some things, and just as friends, we kind of were sharing information. I'm always interested. And then one day he called me up, he's like, you need to take this assessment. And I don't really like assessments that much. So I was like, but I trust Adam's opinion. So he's like, it's really interesting. You got to take it. So I did, and I told him my results. And if he was in the same space, it's like, we both just were like, oh, that's cool. And I stuck it back in the book, and I put the book on the shelf, and like that, it just stayed that way for years. And then we were working on a different project, and Adam was like, do you remember that assessment I had you take? Do you still have it? Yeah, oh yeah, somewhere. I pull it out. Actually, I know right where it was, because I have a very specific memory for where things are. So
that's input. Input does that.
So, and I knew that the card was still inside it. So I got it out. Yeah, here it is. And he's like, I really think there's something here. I think we should try to figure out a way to do something. I've started to work on, some pieces. I think that there's just got to do more with this. There's something inside it. And he already had been working on some models, and we just started. All right. And so initially, when we started developing this stuff, it was for, presenting and coaching clients. We didn't really, just nothing else was out there. He's like, I already looked. I can't find anything that is robust enough, or even really kind of meeting even close to what I think, has the power of this application. So we got to develop it. So we did. And here we are today. I don't think we quite realized how far we were going to take this.
Well, you've done a great job. You really have. It's amazing.
Thanks.
It's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot about ourselves. And I feel like just over time, it actually, especially for Adam's practice, but now mine even more too. It's like it's shifted toward orienting pretty much all of our client work from this lens. And, that didn't happen right away. We had other models we were using and other things. But in developing these tools and plugging the StrengthsFinder into it, I don't know, it's really worked, and it's been fun, where some of the other ones always did feel a little less, exciting and energizing for clients, which I can't, as you know, can't stand. So out they went. So there's just, it kind of drove itself, but here we are.
I just want to point out too, what a great connectedness question to ask, Denise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I have one question. how did you guys connect?
Yeah.
I know that, and I don't even think that was planned.
No, that's just my thinking. I'm just interested in how that comes about.
Yep, exactly.
I guess that theme is accurate then.
And that is a little tip that I rely on a lot, is people will give you clues to their themes. They'll be like, I don't believe in this StrengthsFinder stuff. I need to see some data on it. I'm like, oh, is it analytical in your top 5, you know? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, well, we'll pick it up next week, and feel free, comment. We'll respond to your comments on Kajabi or email if you have questions. I'm a little slow on email, but, you know, shoot me. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Great session. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.